There are places on this earth that don't really ask to be noticed. Looked, passed by, forgotten in favor of taller peaks and more famous names. Lost Creek Wilderness is one of those places, and maybe that's exactly why I ended up here. Not for a summit, not for a checklist, just to see what it feels like to move through a place most people never think to stop for. I started in the late afternoon at the Goose Creek trailhead. Nothing complicated, no big plan. Just a pack, a trail, and a few days to disappear into something slower than everyday life. The goal for the first day was simple, 10 miles. But out here, distance stops meaning what it usually does. Almost immediately, the landscape began to shift. The noise of everything outside the forest faded faster than I expected. No cars, no voices, no signal pulling at attention. Just the sound of steps on dirt and wind moving through the trees that had been standing long before I got here. What makes this place different isn't elevation or drama, it's the shape of it. Instead of sharp alpine peaks, the land opens into something older, heavier, more grounded. Massive granite formations rise out of the forest like they were left behind by another world. Winding creeks cut through open valleys. Hidden meadows appear and disappear without warning. It doesn't feel like the Colorado most people imagine. It feels quieter than that, more patient. At some point, I stopped noticing when I crossed into deeper wilderness. It just happened slowly. The trail kept unfolding, and I kept following it. Every turn felt like a small reveal. Another rock wall, another corridor of trees, another moment where I had to pause without really deciding to. This is what I like most about being out here. The way time stops behaving normally. There's no urgency. No need to be anywhere else. Just the next step. The next climb. The next place to set the pack down for a moment to breathe. By late afternoon, I had gone further than I was thinking about, and eventually, I found a place to stop. A small flat patch of ground near the junction of the Wigwam and Rolling Creek trails, around 9,600 feet. Nothing special at first glance, but after a full day on your feet, it doesn't take much for a place to start feeling like home. As the sun dropped behind the ridgelines, everything softened. The light turned warm, then gold, then quiet. And slowly the wilderness followed. The wind eased, the movement faded, and what was left was stillness. Not the absence of sound exactly, but something deeper than that. A kind of quiet that feels alive. That's usually the moment I understand why I keep doing this. Not the hiking, not the distance, but this part right here, where the world feels far away enough that your thoughts finally stop rushing ahead of you. The next morning came without ceremony, just the familiar rhythm of packing up camp, cold hands, warm coffee, and the quiet uncertainty of not knowing exactly what the day will bring. Even with maps, planning, weather forecasts, the land always feels different when you're standing inside it. More unpredictable, more real. Some of this landscape is unimaginably old. The granite beneath these forests formed deep underground more than 1 billion years ago, long before the Rockies existed, long before anything here looked the way it does now. And over time, everything else was stripped away. Wind, water, ice, slowly revealing what had been buried for ages. And then time kept shaping it. Water seeped into the cracks in the rock, froze, expanded, broke things apart, one winter at a time, until the land became what it is now. Balanced boulders, narrow passages, cliff bands, and formations that don't quite make sense at first glance. Like the landscape is still in the middle of becoming something. And the shapes and creatures that I see out of the rocks, formations, just fascinating. The farther I moved through Lost Creek Wilderness, the more I understood what it really offers. It's not the tallest place, it's not the most dramatic, but it has something that's getting harder to find. Space. Not just physical space, but mental space. The kind you don't realize you've been missing until it's finally here. By the second day, I'd climbed into the high country, near Bison Peak, McCurdy Mountain, close to 12,000 feet. The air always feels thinner, the terrain more exposed, and the weather today was less forgiving. Storms were building all around the range. Not directly overhead, but close enough that you could feel them moving, watching, circling, waiting, and crossing those ridgelines turned into a quiet negotiation of timing. Do I keep moving? Do I stop? And when do I trust the sky? Eventually I dropped back below treeline. The wind softened almost instantly. The world felt less wide, but safer somehow. I stopped for a simple meal, nothing special, just food and water and a moment to reset. Then I kept moving down the canyon. Down there, everything changed again. The landscape tightened. The creek became a constant presence. The forest closed in a little more. It felt like the wilderness was no longer surrounding me, but guiding me forward. By the time I found camp again that night, I was tired in a way that felt honest. Not drained, just fully used. And that's a rare kind of tiredness. The kind that makes everything simple again. The third morning felt different. Not because anything had changed, but because the end was now real. Just a handful of miles left, a slow walk back out. I returned to everything I had stepped away from. I didn't rush it, I just followed the trail, letting the final stretch pass the same way the rest of it had, one step at a time. Through canyon walls, through forest, through quiet sections of the trail that felt like they were holding on a little longer than necessary. And without really thinking about it, I knew the trip had already become something else. Not just a route, not just a weekend outside, but a small reminder of how different life feels when stripped down to its simplest form. By the end, I had covered 44 miles, nearly 7,800 feet of elevation, but none of that really felt like the point. What stayed with me wasn't the numbers, it was the silence between them. Trips like this have a way of resetting what feels normal. They remind you that you don't always need more distance or more time or more anything. Sometimes you just need a place that's quiet enough to notice your own thoughts again. Lost Creek Wilderness isn't the most famous place in Colorado, and it probably never will be. But I don't think that's what it's trying to be. It's just there, waiting, for anyone willing to slow down long enough to actually see it.